Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The rain tapped softly against the kitchen window as Elena Morris wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced toward the living room. She was 23, quiet by nature, and the kind of person who always tried to avoid drama. Tonight, however, she could feel it building like a storm waiting to break. Her younger sister, Tessa, 2 years her junior, was holding court in the middle of the living room, laughing too loudly and making sure everyone's attention stayed on her. Elena had been helping their mom, Diane, set the table when Tessa strutted in wearing a glittering silver necklace that caught the light with every movement. "Isn't it stunning?" Tessa asked, twirling so the piece would sparkle even brighter. Everyone nodded politely, and Elena gave her a small smile. She didn't say much, because she knew Tessa thrived on the spotlight and didn't need any encouragement. "You wish you had something like this, don't you, Elena?" Tessa teased with a smirk. Elena's cheeks warmed, but she swallowed her words and focused on arranging the glasses. Dinner passed with the usual mix of chatter and subtle digs. Elena's father, Mark, laughed at Tessa's jokes, while Diane reminded Elena not to forget about her early shift at the cafe the next morning. She nodded dutifully and stayed quiet as always. Later that night, as the relatives began to leave, Elena started clearing plates while Tessa lingered in the living room, still touching the necklace as if she feared someone would forget it was there. Elena walked past her carrying a tray of cups when Tessa leaned in and whispered, "Careful, Ellie. If you break anything, Mom will have another reason to compare us." Elena bit back a reply, choosing instead to focus on rinsing the dishes. She had learned long ago that arguing with Tessa only made things worse. But something about the smug look on her sister's face made her chest tighten. It was like Tessa knew she could get away with anything. The first shout came just as Elena was drying her hands. "My necklace!" Tessa cried from the living room, her voice high-pitched and panicked. Elena froze. "It's gone!" Tessa wailed. Diane hurried in immediately. "What do you mean gone?" she asked, worry all over her face. "I had it right here a minute ago." Tessa's voice broke into a dramatic sob as she clutched her bare neck. "Someone took it." The atmosphere in the house shifted instantly. Mark stood up from his chair, scanning the floor. Elena stepped into the doorway, confused but calm. "Maybe it fell," she said carefully. "Let's check under the couch." But Tessa's eyes were already darting around, searching for someone to blame. Then Tessa's gaze locked on Elena. "You were near my bag earlier," she said suddenly, her voice trembling in just the right way to sound convincing. "You probably took it. You've always been jealous of me." Elena blinked in shock. "What? No, I didn't touch your bag." But Tessa was already crying harder, turning toward Diane. "See? She won't even admit it. She hates that I get attention. She wants to ruin everything for me." Diane's face hardened, and Mark rubbed his temples. "Elena," Diane said firmly, "just show us your purse. If you didn't take it, you have nothing to worry about." Elena felt heat rise to her face. "Are you serious? You believe her that easily?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Enough!" Diane snapped. "Show the bag." Elena swallowed hard and picked it up from the chair where she had left it, her hands trembling. Before anyone could open the bag, Tessa crossed her arms and said loudly, "No. We need to call the police. If she stole it, this is theft." Elena stared at her, stunned. "Tessa, that's insane. It's just a necklace. It's mine." Tessa cut her off. "It's expensive. And if you really didn't take it, then you shouldn't be afraid of the truth." Diane hesitated, but Mark nodded grimly. "Let's get this settled once and for all." Elena's stomach turned as Tessa actually dialed the police right there in the living room. Within minutes, an officer arrived, notebook in hand, his calm, professional presence making the air feel even heavier. "Evening," he said. "I'm Officer Ramirez. Can someone tell me what happened?" Tessa launched into her story, painting herself as the victim and Elena as the jealous sister who had finally gone too far. Elena stood frozen, listening to the words that could destroy her life. Elena felt her pulse hammering in her ears as Officer Ramirez turned toward her. "Miss, may I see your purse?" he asked, his voice neutral but firm. Everyone's eyes were on her, and she suddenly felt like the walls of the room were closing in. "I didn't take anything," she said quietly, but her words felt small in the heavy silence. Her hands trembled as she held out the bag. Officer Ramirez opened it slowly, methodically, reaching inside. For a moment, all Elena could hear was the sound of zippers and rustling fabric. Then his hand emerged holding the silver necklace, its chain gleaming in the light like a guilty verdict. Gasps filled the room. Diane's face fell, her lips pressed into a thin line, while Mark shook his head in disappointment. "No," Elena whispered, taking a step back. "No, that's not possible. I didn't put it there." Her voice broke, but Tessa was already crying harder, pressing her face into Diane's shoulder. "I told you," she wailed. "She's hated me for years. She couldn't stand me having something beautiful, so she stole it." Elena turned desperately to her parents. "Please, you have to believe me. I didn't do this. She set me up." But Diane only sighed, her voice cold. "Elena, I defended you so many times, but this is too far." Mark rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. "Why would you do this?" he asked quietly. The betrayal in his voice hurt worse than anything else. "I didn't." Elena cried, her voice rising. "She planted it. She's manipulating all of you like she always does." Officer Ramirez raised a hand gently to quiet the shouting. "Let's keep calm," he said, his tone steady but watchful. "Miss Morris, do you mind if I check the rest of your bag?" Elena swallowed hard, then straightened her shoulders. "Go ahead. Check everything," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. Something in her voice made Tessa's head snap up. "Why bother?" Tessa said quickly, her voice suddenly sharp. "You already found the necklace. She's guilty." Officer Ramirez's eyes flicked to her, narrowing just slightly. "I'd like to be thorough," he said. "If she's guilty, we'll know. And if she's not, we clear her name." Elena caught the first flicker of panic on Tessa's face, and for the first time that night, hope sparked in her chest. Officer Ramirez knelt down and carefully emptied Elena's purse onto the coffee table. Wallet, keys, phone, a couple of pens, receipts from the cafe where she worked. He lined them up neatly, then reached back into the bag, running his fingers along the seams. He murmured, brow furrowing. "There's something here." He tugged gently at a small, loose thread, then carefully pulled out a hidden compartment Elena hadn't even known was there. From inside, he retrieved a folded piece of paper and a small velvet pouch. Elena's breath caught. "That's not mine," she said quickly. "I've never seen that before." Ramirez nodded and unfolded the paper. It was a receipt from a pawn shop. He read it carefully, then looked up at Tessa, his expression unreadable. "This is a sales receipt from earlier today," he said, "for a gold bracelet. The name signed here is Tessa Morris." The room went silent. Diane turned toward her younger daughter, confusion flickering across her face. "You sold jewelry today?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tessa's face went pale. "That's not mine," she said quickly, her voice cracking. "She probably forged it. She probably planted it there herself." Officer Ramirez's tone hardened. "Pawn shops require valid ID to complete a sale. This receipt has your name, your signature, and the time of the transaction. If we check the security cameras, we'll see exactly who was there." For the first time, Tessa's confident mask began to slip. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. She's always been the perfect one. She gets good grades. She never gets in trouble. Mom and Dad are always so proud of her, and her voice broke. I just wanted them to notice me for once. Elena's heart twisted, but the anger still burned hot in her chest. So you tried to ruin me? She asked, her voice quiet but sharp. You called the police on me. You were ready to let me get arrested, just so you could feel special. Tessa's tears spilled over as she shook her head. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered. I just thought if everyone saw you mess up, maybe they'd stop expecting me to be like you. Diane covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. Mark finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. Tessa, you lied. You tried to frame your sister. The words hung in the air like a gavel striking. Tessa's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. I'm sorry, she whispered, though it sounded more like defeat than remorse. Diane looked at Elena, her face pale with guilt. I can't believe we doubted you, she said softly. All these years we thought we were protecting Tessa, but we were letting her hurt you. Elena blinked back tears. I just needed you to believe me, she said. That's all I ever wanted. Officer Ramirez tucked the receipt and necklace into an evidence bag. I'll file a report, he said. This will need follow-up, but for now you're cleared. Relief flooded through Elena's body, but the hurt lingered. As Ramirez left, the house fell into a tense silence. Tessa stood there, staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. For once, no one rushed to comfort her. Diane sank into a chair, her hands covering her face, while Mark walked into the kitchen without a word. Elena stood in the middle of the room, her breathing unsteady. For years, she had been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who faded into the background so that her sister could shine. And now, for the first time, the truth was finally visible. Her parents saw Tessa for who she really was, and they saw Elena, too, not as the boring older sister who never complained, but as the daughter who had endured more than they realized. I can't fix this overnight, Diane said quietly, looking up at Elena, her eyes glistening. But I want to try. I want to make this right. Elena nodded slowly. That's going to take time, she said softly. And it's not just about tonight. It's about years of feeling like I didn't matter. Mark returned, his voice steady but full of regret. We see you now, Elena, and we won't let this happen again. Tessa finally spoke, her voice small. I never meant to hurt you this badly, she said, glancing up at Elena. I was tired of feeling invisible. Elena exhaled slowly. You wanted attention so badly that you almost destroyed me. You didn't just hurt me, Tessa. You broke my trust. You made me afraid in my own home. Tessa's lips trembled, but she had no defense this time. Diane stood and walked over to Elena, placing a hesitant hand on her shoulder. Whatever it takes, we will rebuild this family, she said. But it starts with telling the truth, no more lies. Mark nodded firmly. And it starts with consequences, he added, turning to Tessa. You may not face jail time, but you will face accountability here. The next few weeks were quiet, the house strangely heavy with unspoken words. Tessa stayed in her room most of the time, and Diane and Mark made a point of checking in on Elena more, asking about her classes, her cafe shifts, even her friends. At first, it felt awkward, like they were strangers, learning how to talk to each other again. But slowly, something inside Elena began to heal. She no longer felt the need to prove her worth, because she had finally been seen. The night everything fell apart had also been the night she stood her ground and refused to let a lie define her. That truth had been painful, but it had set her free. And as she looked at her parents one evening, both of them sitting at the table waiting to eat dinner with her instead of Tessa's drama taking center stage, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. You tried to bury me with your lies, she said quietly to herself, thinking of her sister upstairs. But all you did was bury yourself. And with that, she smiled for the first time in weeks, knowing that no matter how long it took, she would never go back to being invisible again. A few days later, Officer Ramirez returned to the house with an update. Elena sat at the table, her heart in her throat, while Diane and Mark stood nearby. Tessa hovered in the hallway, pale and tense. The pawn shop confirmed it was Tessa who sold the bracelet, Ramirez said calmly. The footage matches her ID, and there's no doubt she made the transaction. I've filed my report, but considering her age and the fact that she admitted to it, she might get off with a warning or a fine. Still, this will stay on record if anything like this happens again. His words landed heavily in the room. Tessa's face crumpled as she finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't want it to get this far. I just wanted someone to notice me. I didn't know it would turn into this nightmare. Elena watched her, her emotions conflicted. Part of her wanted to hug her sister, to comfort her, but another part of her still felt the sting of betrayal deep in her bones. After Ramirez left, Diane sat everyone down in the living room. This cannot happen again, she said, her voice unsteady but resolute. I spent years defending Tessa because I thought she needed me more. But I see now that I was hurting Elena in the process. I was teaching her that no matter what she did, we wouldn't believe her. That ends now. She turned to Tessa, tears shining in her eyes. You will have to earn back this family's trust, Tessa, and it won't be easy. Tessa sniffled and nodded, looking smaller than Elena had ever seen her. I know, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. Elena's chest ached. She wanted to believe her, but trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. It's not just about saying sorry, Elena said softly. It's about changing. I can forgive you one day, Tessa, but I can't forget what you did. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift in subtle ways. Diane started asking Elena for her opinion more often, on dinner plans, on family outings, even on little decisions that would have gone straight to Tessa before. Mark made time to sit with her in the evenings, asking about her dreams after college, listening without judgment. Elena found herself smiling more, even laughing sometimes, though there was still a heaviness that hadn't fully lifted. Tessa tried to help around the house more, offering to do dishes or run errands. But Elena noticed that her sister's old habits died hard. Every now and then, she would catch Tessa watching her with a complicated expression. Envy, guilt, and something else Elena couldn't quite name. For the first time in years, Elena didn't shrink away from the gaze. She held her head high and let Tessa see that she was no longer the quiet, invisible girl who could be pushed aside. One evening, Elena came home late from the cafe to find Tessa waiting for her at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, their parents already in bed. Can we talk? Tessa asked, her voice small. Elena hesitated, then sat across from her. What is it? She asked. Tessa twisted her hands nervously. I went back to the pawn shop today, she admitted. I bought the bracelet back with my own money. It's not much, but I wanted to fix at least one thing I broke. She slid a small box across the table. Inside was the bracelet, gleaming softly. Elena stared at it for a long moment, then closed the box gently. Buying back what you sold doesn't erase what you did, she said quietly. But it shows you're trying. That matters. Tessa nodded, tears welling up. I'm trying, Ellie. I don't want to be that person anymore. Elena leaned back in her chair, exhaustion and relief washing over her at the same time. You know what hurt the most, she said after a long pause. It wasn't the police or the necklace, or even Mom and Dad believing you. It was knowing that you would let me get dragged away in handcuffs if it meant protecting yourself. Tessa flinched as if the words were a physical blow. I know, she said hoarsely, and I think about that every night. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better. Elena studied her sister's tear-streaked face and, for the first time, saw the fear behind the drama, the insecurity behind the arrogance. It didn't erase what had happened, but it made Elena realize that this was the first step toward something different. The next morning at breakfast, Elena surprised everyone by placing the bracelet box in the middle of the table. Tessa bought it back, she said simply. Diane's eyes softened as she looked at her younger daughter, pride and sadness mingling on her face. That's a start, she said gently. Mark nodded, adding, It takes courage to face what you've done. Tessa stayed quiet, letting the moment speak for itself. Elena didn't say anything more, but she felt a shift inside her, not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of letting go. The house didn't feel so heavy that morning, and for the first time since the incident, breakfast didn't feel like a battlefield. Over time, the neighborhood gossip died down, and life began to look almost normal again. Elena focused on her classes and her work, determined to build a future where no one could ever make her feel small again. She poured herself into her studies, applying for scholarships, dreaming of one day opening her own cafe. Diane supported her more than ever, helping her research schools and programs, while Mark started coming to her shifts just to buy coffee and chat for a few minutes. Each small gesture stitched together some of the wounds that had been left open for years. And even though the pain hadn't completely vanished, Elena realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was growing. One rainy afternoon months later, Elena found Tessa in the living room going through old photo albums. Remember this? Tessa asked, holding up a picture of them as kids, laughing in the backyard. Elena smiled faintly. Yeah, before everything got so complicated. Tessa nodded, her expression thoughtful. I miss that. I miss when we didn't hate each other. Elena sat down beside her, surprising them both. We don't have to stay here, she said quietly. We can start over. But it has to be real this time. No lies. No games. Tessa nodded slowly. Deal. For the first time, Elena believed her. As spring turned into summer, the Morris household felt lighter. Trust was still being rebuilt piece by piece, but the foundation was stronger than before because it was built on truth. Elena no longer felt like the forgotten daughter living in her sister's shadow. She had learned to speak up, to stand her ground, and to demand respect, not just from her family, but from herself. One evening, as she stood at her bedroom window watching the sunset, she whispered to herself, You survived. It wasn't just about that night or the necklace or even Tessa's betrayal. It was about every year she had spent being invisible and every moment she had spent fighting to be seen. And now she finally was. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.